The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of a big lake they call Gitchee Gumee. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. We of a certain age remember this song on the radio and all the news about it. The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, a song by Gordon Lightfoot. The song came out immediately after the ship was taken down by a gale on Lake Superior. The Ojibwe, or Chippewa, called Lake Superior Gitchee Gumee, meaning Great Sea. The largest of the Great Lakes, the largest freshwater lake in surface area of the world. Superior holds 10% of the world's fresh water, covering 31,700 square miles. Her average depth is 483 feet, dropping to 1,322 feet at her deepest. All the water in the other Great Lakes, plus 3 more Lake Eries, could fit in Lake Superior. Her largest feet of water comes from her most northern point, the Nipigon River. She breaks onto the shores of Ontario, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. It would take 551 billion gallons to raise her levels 1 inch. She's home to 88 species of fish, covering 2,726 miles of shoreline. The water within her banks could cover North and South America in a solid foot of water. And she's the coldest of all the lakes, 36 to 39 degrees, which is part of why she never gives up her dead. There are 10,000 estimated shipwrecks in all the Great Lakes. Upwards of 400 have been found in Superior alone. Below Lake Superior is 1, maybe 2 more ancient lakes. The French explorer Sieur de Luth heard rumors of this underground lake and made reference to it as Lac d'Enfer, Lake of Hell. On September 18, 1870, hard hat, copper hat diver William Bitter was working on a breakwater wall for the city of Duluth, where damage had been done to the wall after a storm. He found the entrance to what became known as Lake Inferior, a complete mistranslation. He was in 20 feet of water on a 600-foot lifeline that was also a rudimentary communication system. His monitors on the surface heard him screaming and then noticed there was a whirlpool near his lifeline, so they wheeled him in. He had found a whirlpool, the floor of Lake Superior, leading into the ceiling of a lake below, and that was draining rapidly and forcefully into this lower lake. He reported this to the city, and they agreed to let him go down at least one more time to assess the lake below and learn a little bit more about the damage to the hole itself. On September 9, 1870, after tripling his lifeline from 600 to 1,800 feet, Bitter was back down in the cold water. Moving down through the crack, he experienced a dropping, suspended in midair for at least 100 feet before hitting the top of the water below. In absolute darkness, all he could do was feeling a basalt wall and hugging it. He ran out of line before he found another surface or the bottom of the water. On September 10th, they sent him down again, his third and final descent. Once again with his 1,800 feet of tow line, he dropped in through the same point. At some point, his monitors noticed a change in the line. Kind of that feeling when you get when you're fishing and the line goes limp because you know a fish has stolen your hook and bait. They know they had lost William Bitter. Bringing the line back up, they saw the sever, knew they had no choice, that he was lost, but to go in and cover the hole. They sent divers down the next day to do just that. On June of 2013, University of Minnesota Duluth professor Joseph Morrow organized a team to revisit the hole, taking equipment down to further assess and record. They head out from the original damaged place where William Bitter had met his end. With sonar and various devices, they found the original hole, and with lights, they discovers Bitter's entrance was actually a side access to the cavern. They moved into the deeper areas where they found eyeless cavefish that had pearlescent luster, white crayfish, large white water bugs, and colorless worms. This complete lack of pigment and lack of eyes indicated millions of years of isolation and darkness. This first dip was measured at 500 feet below the bottom of Lake Superior, with instruments indicating at least 1,000 more feet below them. Next step involved moving through the caves of bedrock along the area to find what would be the top. And they determined the best place for that was the then basement of the North Shore Theater. Here they found flooded crevasses, lava tubes, and a massive vertical crack reminiscent of a cathedral ceiling. Below this, they dropped into a rose quartz chamber of 100 feet in drop before hitting the surface of the water. Their instruments indicated from that point 400 more feet of water. Back on January 7th of 2014, Professor Morrow, with fellow professors McPurdy and Oswald, descended through their new path, bringing various dive lines to mark their transition points. With 3 tanks each and additional lighting, the cavefish were reported to be as large as salmon, circling curiously around them, but quickly moving repulsively from this unfamiliar light. Tracking down a basalt wall that was marbled with milky white silicate, they found massive ledges, sheer surfaces, and what they described as water clear as gin. Blowing from the surface, they encountered more and larger worms, legless salamanders, and varieties of white crayfish. They passed the tech level of 180 degrees to a descent of 500 feet, and they still didn't find the bottom. At this level of depth, they discovered a growing whirlpool that had moved from something felt to something seen. Suspecting they had found yet another lake opening, a third lake, and they were feeling its pull. Professor McPurdy found himself stuck in this vortex, and at this level, with all their equipment, no heroic efforts could be risked. Morrow and Oswald had no choice but to horrifyingly watch their colleague descend into this swirling vortex, watching his light whirl down until it finally disappears. Hours of decompression were required to safely ascend. Their next resting spot was the quartz cavern, where their first line was. They were already down onto their 3rd tanks of air, so time was a genuine concern. Moving through the submerged caverns and passages, Oswald's tank got stuck. Visibly, there was nothing to check. Single-file progression of space prevented Morrow from helping. Visibility prevented him from really understanding what had happened. Sounds coming from Oswald led Morrow to believe that the panic of claustrophobia had set in. Oswald had to choose. And Morrow had to choose. If Oswald couldn't figure out how to get out, he knew he would die there. And Morrow had to choose to risk his own life to go back and perhaps fail, or go back up and tell the story. Morrow made his way into the quartz cavern, connecting to the dive line. Looking back from the security of the line, he saw an unlighted Oswald coming toward him. Believing his colleague had broken free and simply lost his light in the process, he went toward his companion, soon to discover it wasn't Oswald at all, but the perfectly preserved hard hat diver, William Bitter, his hand still gripping the dive knife on his belt. Freezing cold water had preserved him perfectly. Horrified and hyperventilating, Morrow knew he had to ascend with care. Morbidly, Bitter seemed to follow along in Morrow's wake. The St. Louis County Sheriff's incident report of this expedition closes with Morrow's final words. Do not attempt to recover the bodies. Seal the entrance. Collapse the caverns. Nuke it all if you have to. Forget this even happened. I'm going to try forgetting for the rest of my life at the bottom of a bottle of gin. My own private hell lake, cold as the devil. Isle Royale National Park is an island in Lake Superior that includes 400 smaller adjacent islands, 45 miles long, 9 miles wide, within the Michigan border. Between Isle Royale and the Minnesota border is a ledge and mysterious structure on the lake floor. What do you see here? An underwater volcano? An abandoned military base? Remains of mining? 500 feet under the lake, 3 miles wide, walls 200 feet tall, 2 miles from north to south, with a quarter-mile driveway entrance. Something else that Isle Royale is known for is ancient copper mining. Mining remains that predate the Bronze Age. The massive copper deposits along Lake Superior used to simply be on the surface. In the summer of 1952, 13-year-old Donald Baldwin was digging around an old gravel quarry near Encanto, Wisconsin, when he unearthed a pile of human bones. He had stumbled upon a burial ground that was full of mysteriously sophisticated copper artifacts. Copper mining on Isle Royale spanned a period of over 4,500 years, between 15 and 20,000 years ago, when much of it was still covered in glacial ice. Mining here began 2,500 years before the Common Era, when this copper was simply exposed as soft veins on the surface. Archaeologists have determined that their mining methods involved using stones to pound the soft metal deposits out and then work them into various cold hammered tools. There are more than 1,000 pits discovered on Isle Royale, covering a time of 1,500 years. Copper remains and specialized tools everywhere. Only in Lake Superior will you find euperlites, a local name for syenite stones, a rock that glows in UV lights. Serratin rocks have special mineral compositions that allow them to react differently under different light sources, displaying bold oranges, greens, blues, and reds. They were dubbed euperlites by Eric Ritamaki, a lifelong rock hunter and specialist in syenite. Sodalite infused into the rocks is what allows their glow. Ritamaki has made a career of studying and collecting euperlites as well as leading tours. If you'd like to know more, you can look him up on the Euperlite website. Apostle Island is in the Bayfield area of Wisconsin, a national seashore, 12 miles of mainland, including 22 islands. It is noted for its Devil's Island sea caves, which become just as famous as ice caves in winter. Lake Superior has its own Nessie, Mishipishu, the underwater serpent creature. In the late 17th century, Father Lejeune was standing on Superior, watching indigenous men fish. All of a sudden, there was a great splashing about. Horrified, he watched as these gentlemen wrestled out a strange creature, then nervously released it. At least 10 feet long, with a lizard body, head like a turtle, and what seemed to be fins all along its back. Legend among the Ojibwe, or Chippewa, held that this being was the monster responsible for catastrophes along the water. Mishipishu means the great lynx, or underwater panther. It's also known to the Algonquin, the Ottawa, the Menominee, the Shawnee, and the Cree, under a variety of similar names, noted for causing rogue storms. Considered malevolent and terrifying, though also considered a guardian of the copper on the islands and along Lake Superior. A guardian of the copper. The Algonquin considered the Mishipishu creatures that could bring great protection and healing by testing the ethical limits of the people. Depending on their mood, they could influence a bountiful catch as well as a bountiful crop. In 1977, hiker Randy Braun was visiting Porcupine Mountains Reservoir Wilderness. Walking along a rocky shore area, he settled on a large boulder to pull out a snack when he noticed an unusual pattern in the water on the waves of the lake. First he thought it was logs. The water was quite rough. Then he realized it was distinctively coming towards him, the way that dolphins move through waves. He described it as an anaconda with ridges on its back and the girth of a Volkswagen. It was headed dead toward him. This was an area with muddy, slimy, wet rocks and sheer cliffs behind him. there was nowhere for him to run. But he was able to find a sort of hollowed out grotto and hid behind a large rock. He watched the creature approach, and then at some point seemed to sit still in the water, then flip and turn and disappear. Mishipishu. On the Canada side is Agawa Rock, near the mouth of the Agawa River, where there are pictographs made between 150 and 400 years ago. These are known as the Anishinaabe, another version of Mishipishu. Shipwrecks in Lake Superior, the great graveyard of the lakes. The worst was the Ophelia, a passenger ship moving people across the lake. In 1854, it sank, taking all 150 passengers and crew. In December of 1927, the USS Kamloops was carrying farm equipment to Canada and sank near Isle Royale in 280 feet of water. Most of the crew thought that they were close enough to water that they could survive the 37-degree cold and seemed to have jumped ship, hoping to make it to shore. But none of them did. Only their bodies washing up. The captain went down with the ship and still is floating around the bridge. Divers refer to him as Old Whitey. No bacteria grows in such cold water. He sits in state in perfect preservation. No discussion of shipwrecks on Lake Superior would be complete without at least a mention of the Edmund Fitzgerald. November 10th, 1975. She was 729 foot long, designed to carry iron ore and pellets. Her first voyage was October 22nd, 1958. And at her sinking in 1975, she had clocked her 785th trip. It is sad to discover that during the Coast Guard investigations following the wreck, so many life jackets were washing ashore. All of the life jackets on the boat washed ashore. I will read the lyrics of Gordon Lightfoot's song. They tell a haunting story. The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchee Gumee. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. With a load of iron ore, 26,000 tons more than the Edmund Fitzgerald weighed empty, the good ship and crew was a bone to be chewed when the gales of November came early. The ship was the pride of the American side, coming back from some mill in Wisconsin. As the big freighters go, it was bigger than most, with a crew and a captain well seasoned. Concluding some terms with a couple of steel firms when they left, fully loaded, for Cleveland. Then later that night, when the ship's bell rang, could it be the north wind they'd been feeling? The wind in the wires made a tattletale sound when the waves broke over the railing. And every man knew as the captain did too. 'Twas the witch of November come stealing. The dawn came late, and the breakfast had to wait, when the gales of November came slashing. When afternoon came, it was freezing rain in the face of a hurricane west wind. When supper time came, the old cook came on deck saying, "Fellas, it's too rough to feed ya." At 7 p.m., a main hatchway caved in. He said, "Fellas, it's been good to know ya." The captain wired in. He had water coming in, and the good ship and crew were in peril. And later that night, when his lights went out, came the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turns the minutes to hours? The searchers all say they'd have made Whitefish Bay if they'd put 15 more miles behind her. They might have split up, or they might have capsized. They might have broke deep and took water. And all that remains is the faces and the names of the wives and the sons and the daughters. Lake Huron rolls. Superior sings in the rooms of her ice water mansion. Old Michigan steams like a young man's dreams. The islands and bays are for sportsmen. And farther below, Lake Ontario takes in what Lake Erie can send her. And the iron boats all go, as the mariners all know, with the gales of November remembered. In a musty old hall in Detroit, they prayed, in the Maritime Sailors' Cathedral. The church bell chimed till it rang 29 times for each man on the Edmund Fitzgerald. The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchee Gumee. Superior, they said, never gives up her dead when the gales of November come early.